Salvete! Welcome to Latin Lesson 2 for beginners. This is going to be a pretty content-heavy lesson, so you might want to watch it more than once. In this lesson, we're going to learn about nouns. In Latin, nouns are classified according to their form, and there are 5 different noun groupings. We're going to learn about 2 today. We're also going to learn new words, including some Latin prepositions, and you might be surprised how many you already know. Okay, so can you remember the 4 words we learned in Lesson 1? They were femina, liber, gladius, and vir. So now that we know a few words, we can create a mini English-Latin dictionary. Okay, and yes, I do realise that it's not a proper dictionary because the entries aren't ordered, but it is sufficient to illustrate the point that I'm going to make. I'm going to group the entries by gender, masculine or feminine, and introduce a third column to the table. Voila! As you can see, for all the examples, nouns whose second form, that is to say, the second word that we're given in the dictionary entry, ends in I, are masculine, and nouns whose second form ends in AE are feminine. Let's learn some new vocabulary so we can expand our dictionary. Insula, island. Regina, queen. Notice that even though the G is followed by an I, it's still hard. All C's and G's in Latin are hard regardless of whether they precede an I or an E. Dominus, master. Poeta, poet. So let's add the new entries. Insula has a second form that ends in AE, so it's feminine. Regina has a second form that ends in AE, so it's also feminine. Dominus has a second form that ends in I, so it's masculine. Poeta has a second form that ends in AE, and it's masculine. Huh? Poeta doesn't fit our rule. It's an exception. Maybe we should come up with a better system for organising nouns. Okay, I've got it. We'll stick with 2 groupings. Group 1 will contain AE ending nouns regardless of gender. Group 2 will have the I ending nouns. One more thing, I'm going to call these groups or classifications declensions. Declension might seem like a long and unfamiliar word, but really all it is a group of nouns which follow similar rules. The first declension are nouns whose second form ends in AE and have a dictionary entry form AE. They are mostly feminine, but there are a few masculine nouns which refer mainly to occupations. Many of the masculine first declension nouns are also words derived from Greek. Some examples of first declension masculine nouns are poeta, insula, neuter, and agricola. Second declension nouns have a form ending in I. Second declension nouns are either masculine or neuter in gender. Some examples of second declension neuters are oppidum, periculum, donum, factum, consilium, and auxilium. Abstract nouns are usually neuter. Nouns decline, but what does this mean? Last time I talked about inflection, how words change their form to convey different meanings. Nouns and adjectives inflect by declining. Latin has 6 cases, 6 different forms for nouns. Here they are. The nominative case is the form of a noun when it is the subject of a verb. The genitive translates to of something. In the accusative case, the noun is the object of the verb. The dative case means to or for something. The ablative case conveys by, with, or from something. The vocative case, as its name suggests, is used for direct address. So if you wanted to get someone's attention, for example, if I wanted to say, "Hey Jane," in Latin, I would change the form of the name Jane, since I would be calling her. Are you ready to decline some nouns yourself? Here are the first declension endings for singular nouns. Notice the nominative and vocative forms are identical, and so are the genitive and dative forms. Let's try a concrete example. Via, a street or a road. The second form gives us our stem, which we add to the endings we've just learned. We get via, viae, viae, viam, via, via, which mean the street, subject to the verb, of the street, for or to the street, object of the verb, by, with, or from the street, and street in case you feel like calling a street. The second form in the dictionary entry is in fact the genitive singular of a noun. It tells us which declension a noun belongs to as well as giving us the stem. How about the plural forms? Viae, viarum, viis, vias, viis, viae. So these translate as the streets subject, of the streets, to or for the streets object, by, from, or with the streets. And streets. Okay, so let's try another noun, fama, which means fame, rumour, or reputation. Right, let's have a look at the second declension now. Remember we had US, ER and UM nouns in the second declension? Let's start with the US ones. They're a bit trickier than first declension nouns. The nominative and vocative singular endings are different. Also, the dative and genitive singular endings differ. But their dative and ablative endings are the same, and also the same as the dative and ablative endings of the first declension nouns. This is how we decline dominus, which means master. In the singular, we have dominus, domini, domino, dominum, domino, domine. In the plural, we have domini, dominorum, dominis, dominos, dominis, domini. Let's try another noun, filius. In the singular, we have filius, filii, filio, filium, filio, filii. Notice that the singular vocative form of filius is irregular. In the plural, we have filii, filiorum, filiis, filius, filiis, filii. Okay, so next we have an example of an ER second declension noun. This is where you have to be careful to use the genitive singular as your stem, because it's different from the nominative singular form. The endings are all the same as US nouns, apart from the vocative singular, which is the same as the nominative singular. Here's another example of an ER second declension noun, this time aga, which is a field. Right, so now let's move on to neuter nouns. These are the neuter endings. Notice that the nominative, accusative and vocative endings are identical. Also, if the singular is the plural is are. So let's try an example. Donum, a gift or a present. So in the singular we have donum, doni, dono, donum, dono, donum. In the plural we have dona, donorum, donis, dona, donis, doni. Right, so now that we've more or less figured out the regular endings, let's try some irregular second declension nouns. Here we have wir, which means man, and here are the endings. In the singular we have wir, wiri, wiro, wirum, wiro, wir. In the plural we have wiri, wirorum, wiris, wiros, wiris, wiri. Let's try another, a bit more irregular noun, and that is deus, which is a Roman god. So in the singular we have deus, dei, deo, deum, deo, deus. In the plural we have di, deorum, dis, deos, dis, di. So as you can see, it's very, very irregular in the plural. And let's go back to first declension nouns and look at the feminine form of deus, which is dea, a goddess. Note that the dative and ablative plurals are deabus and not deis, as you might expect. This is because, as well as dis, deus has deis as a plural dative and ablative form. So deabus is used for dea to avoid confusion. Likewise, the dative and ablative plural forms of filia are filiabus to avoid confusion with filius. Okay, so let's put our new knowledge of declensions to good use. You probably recognise a few of these phrases. They are English phrases that have been borrowed from Latin, and they all include Latin prepositions. The prepositions are in bold for clarity. In Latin, a preposition will usually take a noun in either the accusative or ablative case. Which case it takes depends on which preposition it is. So, for example, you can see the phrase at the top, deus ex machina. Machina is a first declension noun, and in this context, it's in the ablative. So, here are a list of prepositions and the cases that they take. Are or ab, which means away from or by, takes the ablative case. Ad, which means towards or to, takes the accusative. For example, ad infinitum, which you saw in the example before. Cum, which means with, takes an ablative. You already know a phrase that you already probably know the phrase summa cum laude, which is called an ablative of manner, and we'll learn about that later. You have de, which takes an ablative, and that means about, down from, or concerning. A or ex also takes an ablative, and it means out from. In can take an accusative or an ablative. When in takes an accusative, it means into, onto, or against. When in takes an ablative, it means in or on. Pro takes an ablative, and it means in front of, on behalf of, for, in return for, or instead of. Per takes an accusative, and it means through. What you'll notice is that most of the prepositions that take an accusative convey movement or motion, such as ad, which is towards, per, which is through, and in, which is into. Most of the prepositions that convey situation or position at a point take the ablative. Right, so let's try some examples and see how we can do. Example 1. How would you say in the woods? The word for wood or forest is silwa, and in this context it should be used in the singular. Got it? In silwa. How about into the woods? In silwam. In this example, silwam is the accusative form, and in the previous example, silwa was in the ablative. Okay, so for a slightly trickier example, how would you say concerning rumours? De farmis. Farmis is the plural ablative form of farmer, and de takes an ablative. Okay, so for the last example question. How would you say for the daughters? Pro filiabus. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye, I'll see you next time.